Hi, Hilary.
Amy.
Hi. So good to have you here because obviously I've known you for a long time and you're one of my mentors when I was in amateur boxing, and I always appreciate you so much. So thank you so much for your time, for being here.
No problem. It's taken us a while to get a date, but we got there in the end.
Yes. Yes, I know you're very, very busy, so I really appreciate it. Um, I guess to start with, do you want to introduce yourself and going back in time a little bit, how you got into the world of boxing?
It's going back a long way. So I'm Hilary Lissenden, and so I got into boxing quite late in life, and so I had a very traditional upbringing. I was daughter of two doctors in Jersey, and went to Cambridge and studied English and went into publishing and all those very traditional things. And then, it was literally, I was working as a freelance editor. I had my baby, my son, Joe, who's now 29. But when he was born, I just became very bored with going to the gym, and I felt fat and I couldn't get fit and all those things we feel like, and sometimes as new mums. And I wanted to do something different. And I literally just kind of walked past a boxing club in Herne Hill, like above the pub, was Clinton Mackenzie's boxing gym. And it said on the side, get fit, not hit, or something. And I thought that might be interesting to try. So I walked in there and started doing so. Actually, it's not as simple as I walked in there. I walked in there to book a session, and in the gym there was some guy weighing in his jockstrap in the middle of the gym. So I was a bit like, oh, okay, maybe this. I didn't leave, but it was kind of like a moment. But I stuck around and joined the gym just to kind of get fit, really, and sort of basic techniques of non-contact boxing. But then sort of things went from there, as you know me as a sort of referee and judge. But I became fit. I lost 2 stone in, I don't know, 6 weeks or something. I really went for it. I trained 6 days a week and with all the boxers, and ended up sort of sparring with the guys because there were no girls around about then to spar with. And I did a couple of white collar bouts just because I wanted to try it, and got well beaten up. That wasn't really for me. And then I tried coaching and I didn't really enjoy that either. But then somebody said to me, why don't you have a go at judging? Because, you understand the sport, and, you've been doing it a while. And so I became a judge. And from there became a referee. So that was, we talk about mentors. It was Terry Gillam, who we both know well, who kind of was involved with Clinton and the club. He was trying to start up there and said to have a go at being an official. So that's how I kind of got into the sport really properly. Again, began that 13-year journey that you know about as a referee and judge.
Amazing. Yes.
Yeah, it's a long time ago.
Yeah, so I guess that because knowing a little bit about the process of like being a judge and kind of progressing as a judge, you could choose to become a referee or a supervisor, as we call it. So what made you want to be the referee instead of supervisor?
Well, at the time as well, I was really interested just in what the sport was doing in general in that gym. I saw there were young kids off the estates, literally sort of training alongside stockbrokers, white collar workers and stuff. And there was a little bit of magic going on without anybody kind of having any strategy or process around it. People training together, people communicating in ways that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise in different social constructs. So, I was also at the same time I was starting out on my judging career, because that's how we all have to start anyway. I was thinking about whether there was something more I could do to support this kind of movement that I saw happening, which really now we call sport for development, but wasn't recognised as such at the time. So that's when I kind of also started looking at starting my own charity based around boxing, and it became London Community Boxing, as you know. So the judging became sort of part of that journey. I was on the circuit as a judge. I was getting to know, the people on the circuit, the clubs, the process, how you develop, and how you sort of like progress as an official. So it all kind of happened together in a really kind of weird left field career move. So I moved from publishing into starting up effectively my own charity. And then that took quite a few years. So my sort of judging and reffing career happened in parallel with that. But I was always just, we have to do, what was it? I don't know if it was 2 years then, or was it 1 year as a judge before you could referee? It's 2 now, isn't it? And there were no female referees around at that time that I knew about, and so there was a need for it, and someone suggested I have a go. But I think I've told you before, that whole kind of first experience, I didn't referee any sparring in the gym or have any practical experience. I qualified in my refereeing exam and got chucked into the ring with a mentor sort of watching me at an open air show in East London with kind of 500 people watching. And I look back on it and I think, if anything would have happened, I wasn't really very well prepared for that, but that's kind of how we learned then. I'm not sure it's quite the same now, but we were thrown in at the deep end and we had a go, and we either sort of sunk or swam, and I liked it, and so that's why I kind of wanted to stay with the reffing. I think the supervising, I do a lot of management, administration work, paperwork and stuff in my day job, so I was never particularly interested in that. I like to be in the ring, making the decisions, making that difference as a referee. So that's how I kind of progressed, I suppose.
Great, thank you. But so you must have been the only female referee in London for sure. I'm not sure about the whole England. Were you the only one at the time?
Yeah, I think so. The first other female referee I met, I think, was Donna, who was a one-star ref, but I only met her once I got up to the stage where I could do national championships. So originally, yeah, there weren't any others, and it was an interesting experience.
Yeah, and I think because Donna is based in Manchester,
Yeah.
right? So it's kind of like one in the north and one in the south kind of thing at the time.
Yeah, there weren't many. I mean, you were coming along. I don't know, were you like, I know 2 or 3 years after? Because you were boxing at the time that I started reffing.
Oh my gosh. So what was it like at the time? Obviously, there are very few female referees in the whole UK. And like you said, like once you progress to the sort of championship level or national championship level, then people can start seeing you, right? They see you.
Yeah.
And what was that like?
So I can say genuinely, I really loved it. I loved the grassroots boxing, the club circuit, how you learn your dues as a referee and judge. You do get thrown into some fairly sort of fruity situations, knockouts, blood, sweat and tears, huge kind of like rowdy crowds and stuff. But I really, really enjoyed that part of it. I enjoyed coming up and learning sport. And I think partly it was because it's never boring, right, being a ref. Never, because there's never 2 bouts are the same, even if you have the same boxers and you have the same ring and it's just going to be a different bout. So I really like that and being that close to the action. And I think I only started finding it difficult, if you're asking specifically as female, as I started coming up through the ranks. So as you know, we do C grade, which is club ref, and then you can do your upgrades to B, which is sort of region, so doing the regional championship rounds and finals, and then national, which is A, so you do national championships, and then you can progress to the star international. So it took me 13 years to get to 1 star, and I probably can say honestly I enjoyed it less as I went up the ladder. I did get some abuse as a female ref, right? But I think refs get abuse anyway, and I never found it particularly misogynistic or off-putting in the early years. People were a little bit interested, and I did have a few comments, what do you know? You're not a boxing person, you've never boxed. It was more about that, I think, rather than the fact that I was a woman in predominantly a man's sport. So yeah, I think at that stage I loved it, and felt that I was learning so much and had loads of support. Nobody was unsupportive, I had lots of really good male mentors. And even today, when people are looking at specifically women and girls focused sport in sport or in life, I'll always make the point, don't just go for female mentors, because the men have a lot to teach us. They've been in the sport actually a lot longer. And there's lots of different kind of environments that you get into where you can actually learn a lot of skills and kind of like techniques and strategies and tactics from them that maybe we don't know about so much because we're still relatively new in the sport. So I didn't, I had a few, I did get called a few names, and I did have one woman I stopped her boxer on a club show. It was her son, and he was crying against the ropes, and I stopped him, clearly because I didn't want anyone in the ring in tears under my watch. And I got told that I should be in the kitchen. I had no place in the ring, be in the kitchen cooking for my man, and that was a bit of a low point. And then the little boxer brought me a trophy, his runners-up trophy, and stamped it on the table in front of me and said, "That's for you. You're the worst referee in the world." That was fun. But those were pretty few and far between. I mean, they're stories that I tell because they stick in your head when it happens, but it wasn't like every time. It's a couple of times I had to be escorted out of a venue by security because, coaches usually, actually, rather than parents, would get really shirty, but it can happen to the men as well. So I don't think that in the early years anyway I suffered much from being the only woman, and it was there's a bit of pride in it as well. It was a bit of pride, like, I can do this. I didn't box, but I know the rules, I know how to apply them, and I'm getting better, and I liked that journey. I really found it great.
Yeah. No, great. I remember the mom and the little boxer giving you the trophy. I mean, at the time we all laughed, didn't we? But it was just, I mean,
okay, great.
yeah. But wasn't it a bit disheartening for another woman to tell you that you should stay in the kitchen? I find it quite sad.
I've got really sad. I don't know, things. I like to think, I think probably things have changed a bit. And, the more of us there are, the more visible we are. Like yourself, you've got your own platform and pros. I think, it isn't like it was. This we're talking, 10 years ago that I was doing the club show circuit mostly. Yeah. But I did a lot of club shows, and, I did every Ballon show that I think, for years and years. And they were really colourful, some of those shows. But I don't think that, when we talk about women, when the need for women and girls and, diversity on the officials pathway, because I think that's something that people still don't really get, is that it's a talent pathway, officiating. We talk about coaching, and you move up the talent pathway in coaching, and, you have your England boxing and GB boxing performance coaching pathways. Obviously, you have talent pathways in the sport itself, but in officiating, it's also a talent pathway. We have to learn, we have to study, we have to practice, we make mistakes, we take exams, we do seminars, we do horrible evaluated bouts where you're, the crooked finger of death, where they call you over and say, "What did you do wrong in the second minute of the third round?" And you're like, I don't know. You tell me. So, it's tough, isn't it? Like, it's proper development. And so we can't fast track. Shouldn't fast track anybody. And we certainly shouldn't fast track women and girls in the sport in any way, because we can't go seasons thinking that we've got this, right? We understand this, we know it. I've had all the situations, and, and then something happens that you've never encountered before. And you're put right back down again to go, I don't know anything, and there's this whole kind of like trajectory of kind of you develop, you feel confident, and then you're like, oh, okay, hang on a minute. I've never come across that before. That was really difficult, and I need support in navigating that particular thing. And of course, it's a risk to life sport, right? It is absolutely. People's health, safety, well-being, even lives, without being melodramatic, are in our hands when we're in the ring. So, we need to promote and support and help women and girls progress in the right ways, so that they have a good experience, they feel it's a learning experience, they're supported along that journey, but not putting them in situations where, well, we need optically to have you looking great, and it looks like we're supporting women and girls in this space, whereas actually it's skin deep, because we're not actually learning our trade in the way that we need to. So I think we have to be patient and let the talent come through, and make sure that it's properly supported along the way, rather than just looking at somebody who has talent and wants to do it, fantastic, but actually needs time to grow in that space.
No, I really appreciate it, because I remember when I was C grade, when I started, and there were people saying that, oh, they're going to fast track me. And I remember you pulled me aside and said that, right, just see, you pretty much asked me to kind of like hand on heart, like, do I feel ready to be upgraded? And I remember you told me the story of you having the experience that they push you forward for something that you weren't really supposed to, and then you feel like quite exposed and not supported. Is there something that you like to
no, it was even worse than that in a way. It was an all-female televised show at the TA. Do you remember when we used to do the shows down at the Territorial Army and stuff like that? And I was asked to do it, and I did it, and I didn't realise. I actually genuinely didn't realise that I should have been an A grade. I think I was a B grade. in order to take that on, because it was the equivalent of like a championship show. So I did it and it was fine and nothing went wrong. But then afterwards, one of my mentors said, you should never have taken that assignment. You're not qualified for it. And if something had gone wrong, I remember his actual words were, they would have thrown you to the wolves. So, and then ironically, and I'm not bitter about this, but you have to reflect on these things because it did happen. A few weeks later, I was proposed to do my upgrade, my A grade upgrade at Haringey, and the same person that put me forward to officiate on that TA show said I wasn't ready for my upgrade. And I stood up for myself a bit then, because it's hard, it's hard to stand up for yourself sometimes in this space. But I said, look, don't put me forward because you need me to be there and visible for your own purposes. But then either I'm ready or I'm not. If I'm ready, give me a chance at my upgrade and put me out there. But if I'm not, then don't use me, because I do think that was happening and possibly still does happen. So it's something that I would always say to up and coming female officials is like, Chris Roberts, I think, was someone that said it to me, you have to be in your lane. You have to be really, really solid in your lane and confident before you allow people or you push yourself forward to progress, because everybody wants to go that step up, and I was no different. But it's not helpful. It's not helpful to the sport. It's not helpful to you, to your mental health, and to the people that we're supposed to be looking after and protecting. And I think that's something that we still lack, is an evaluation system that is fair on everybody, that actually evaluates people along the pathway so that you know what to expect. So for the purposes of this call, I guess, to clarify, we only really get formally evaluated when we reach A grade, so national grade, right, where we go up to the national championships, and we have 3-star graded referees and judges who sit there, or international technical officials who sit there and evaluate our performance and give us scores and give us feedback on every single bout, judge and ref. And it can be quite brutal. It really can be quite brutal, and it's quite an experience. You're up there, you're being televised, you're being evaluated, you're being assessed, and it's quite a shock to the system. And that doesn't happen earlier on in the pathway. And partly, I think, because the evaluators are all at that level, and there's only so many of them, and they're volunteering. So how do you ask them to come down to London and evaluate B grade officials at a regional championship? They don't have endless time to give. But I think if we had more evaluation at lower grades, and that actually they didn't limit the evaluators to the 3-star officials, that actually they trained people up who had good qualities to be an evaluator. So I could evaluate an A grade as a 1-star because I've been through that journey, and I could help give them constructive criticism and feedback and make them feel they have a positive experience because I have like decent relationship management skills. Just because you're a fantastic referee doesn't mean that you would be an amazing evaluator. I just feel that it's a different skill set. So I think that could be something that could be implemented strategically across the sport, where people then would have more meaningful support at an earlier stage. We've talked about it.
Yeah, no, totally.
Costs money, takes time. Yeah.
No, but totally. I think like just all the things that you said, I kind of feel like it's not just in boxing, it's probably across sports and also across like your corporate, like people's career in like leadership positions and stuff like that. I mean, I feel really grateful for you, because when I was coming up, you always gave me really good feedback after every single bout and every show. And it was constructive feedback that I could learn from. There are things I could take away and think about, oh, yes, yeah, I can improve on these kind of things. And I think that really prepared me, moving forward. And sometimes that I would get feedback thinking that, well, that's a bit harsh or that's a bit unfair by some other evaluators. But then I will always have your support. And I guess that what I'm trying to say is that having that someone who is really having that skills to be able to give good feedback and being supportive, being, in my corner, that is really essential. It's really important, isn't it? Because some people, they
that in life, as like you say, it's not just about that. It's in life. Well, I mean, I was sometimes quite harsh. I remember telling you not to roll your eyes when you got cross with the box. It's just not.
Which is very helpful, because I didn't realize I was doing it. Imagine, honestly.
But we all learn. I've made some bad mistakes. Like, as you know, I've been absolutely roasted, hauled over the coals for them. I remember one championship where I literally spent the whole weekend trying not to cry because my evaluation was like so harsh. And I don't think that's right. I totally get the need for consistent standards. I completely get the need for hard progression outcomes. Not everybody's going to be Olympic standard referee and judge. And I think that's also something that our culture doesn't help. The fact that it's almost like if you are a really good club referee and judge, that's not enough. You need to progress. You need to be, whether that comes from inside us or it comes from the culture where people are expecting that from us. But actually the sport needs everybody at every level. So it's fantastic to have a great B grade judge referee at the top of that, same coaches at the top of their game, who can support their regions. They don't necessarily want to or have to put themselves under the pressure and the time commitment and the cost commitment, because this is all voluntary, cost us loads of money, to do all of this and put themselves through that just to progress for the sake of it. And I think there's this constant push to kind of go on and on and on and on. And as I said earlier in the call, I didn't enjoy it as much when I got to those kind of more pressured levels. I would get really nervous. I don't know if you still get nervous. Right up to when I stopped reffing, get really, really nervous, and you have to not show it, and you have to manage that. And same in life, often we have to do those things, but this is by choice, and as well as your day job, and you're going abroad on international assignments where the food's not great, they don't speak English, you're kind of, the technical delegate doesn't like women or whatever it is, and you're there and you're on your own, and this is by choice, and not everybody is going to want to do that, and not everybody should have to do that. And I think to value our officials at every level and every stage, reward them, incentivize them, acknowledge their contribution to the sport is as important, if not more so, than this kind of constant push to. And women and girls suffer more from that because, as we talked about, the need of the organisations, governing bodies, whatever, to show diversity and inclusion isn't always authentic and doesn't always look at what experience that person has or needs or wants in order to progress in a way that suits them. Some people are really quick learners and they fly. But when a woman will say to me, I'd like to be a referee, you're like, absolutely, go for it. Fantastic. We need more women. But there's always a but. Be aware of what you're putting yourself up for. You need to be resilient. You need to have a skin. We shouldn't have to be saying that, but we do, and it's still true. And so, I will always be really honest about that, because there's no point sugarcoating it. It isn't always going to be great, right? It's not always going to be great.
No, totally. Yeah. I remember one time I spoke to a new female referee, and she was quite frustrated. And I just said, well, I said to her, it's sad for me to say this. I said, but sometimes you have to play their game in order to. And how sad is that? I feel so bad for saying it, but it's so true, because if you don't play their game, you're not going anywhere. If you are someone who's so ambitious, but you want to do it your way, I'm sorry, you're just not getting anywhere in this
Absolutely
world.
true. And you have to suck up, right? You have to kind of, they'll talk to you, and like you say, you might feel it's unfair, but you can't argue back. You can't put your position forward and say, but I did that because the culture is that you sit there and you listen and you go, yes. And so I think I remember the bit of advice I gave you was, at some stage, everybody's throwing everything at you, and it could be the finest detail of your position in the ring, should be a foot forward or a step back or whatever, or it can be really, integral to what you're doing, but you're getting everything thrown at you. And I think what I decided to do quite early on was to just listen to everything, agree with them. This is not right. They are all guys, right? So agree with the guys. Go, yeah, okay. You're a 3-star. You know what you're talking about. I'll listen to you and nod nicely. But actually, I'm going to take what's useful to me, and I'm not going to apply everything because I can't. It's like, as a coach, you can't throw in that minute between rounds a million different instructions at your boxer who's exhausted and under pressure. And, it's like those things that you really need to take on board to get through that bout, or to win, or to progress in your officiating career. So I was going to develop my own style. So, for example, I'm quite small, believe it or not. I don't have that loud voice, and I cannot always appear confident, despite the left lamb in my job and everything. So I decided I wanted to be very confident and have control in the ring, but without being aggressive, because there are aggressive referees who are constantly in the face of the boxer, picking up on every fault. So I did a lot of work on trying to convey authority in the ring without shouting, without being aggressive, and that took ages. It took ages, and studying people that I respected and studying the style of refereeing that I really liked and felt was really effective. And I think the first time, it was really quite recent, like over the last maybe 3 or 4 years, that a boxer came over to me at the end of the bout and touched my hand in respect. That not the kind of the announcement, but actually I was standing in the corner waiting to leave the rim, and they came over and said thanks, ref, and touched my hand. That was a really big moment for me, because I felt I actually really had their respect, not about who I was or that I was a woman or whatever. It was just like they respected my curation of that bout and my presence in the ring and the way that I looked after them. And that was quite an emotional moment. But it took ages. And lots of adjustments and lots of tears.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, I think just going back to what you said earlier on, you're just like, I think for the spectators, they don't realize how much work a referee needs to put in to their work, right? To our work. They just kind of see someone in the ring and then they want everything to be perfect, but they forget that we're also human beings, that we make mistakes and we're also learning at the same time. And I think a lot of times that spectators lack that kind of empathy, I guess.
Oh, and they lack knowledge. And this isn't just the crowd, this is the coaches or even the boxers. They don't know the rules sometimes. And that isn't even just at club level. I mean, how many times have you been in the ring when you've given a recovery count for a low blow and the coaches have kicked off? So like, ref, it was a low blow. I'm like, read the rules, it's a recovery count. It's in the rules. We study how to deliver the low blow, how to manage that.
Yeah.
And it's quite complicated. You've got 10 seconds recovery count, then you've got your 30 seconds, your 30 seconds, your 30 seconds, and then it's an RSC and all of those things. The coaches don't necessarily know that. And that's really frustrating. That is something that really, really annoys me, when you're shouted at for something where, they just don't know what it is you're doing. And the rules are quite complicated, and there are rules that look great on paper. I think only twice in my career did I ever have a boxer knocked out of the ring, and that rule where they have to come back into the ring unassisted, and it's all very clear on paper, but when it happens, they're sprawled on the judges' table, there's water everywhere, people naturally trying to get them back on their feet and in the ring, and all this, it's chaos, and you are in charge of that. And so there's stuff that happens that's not great. What was it? Was it you that always quoted Tony's analogy about peeling the onion? You come out and you said, "Oh my God, I did that wrong," and that really goes, "Was the onion peeled?" And you're like, "What do you mean? Was the onion peeled? Did you peel the onion?" Like, yeah, the onion was peeled. In other words, they came out of the ring. They're both saying the right decision. It doesn't really matter that I didn't wipe the gloves when they touch the canvas or whatever. But those things do matter, and those are the things we're picked up on. So no matter how well we do, there's always a criticism, and there's always something that they pick you up on, and it can be quite disheartening.
Yes. You mentioned, I know, just brings back so much memories, so many memories,
doesn't it?
No, but I mean, jokes aside, like these memories and all these things have really laid the foundation, like for me. And I think I learned so much as a person as well. And yeah, like these are fun memories that I really cherish. So yeah, and thanks to you. You're a big part of that. So
well, that's okay. Well, it was lovely having you around as well, because we did come up together and we could sort of sit down after a show and just go, that was tough.
Yeah. You mentioned a lot about sort of in terms of the pathway development, and you mentioned about the national governing body. So obviously you were a director sitting on the board of England Boxing for nearly 5 years, I think.
Yeah.
And then recently you were on the advisory board for World Boxing. So that's like proper international level. So would you like to talk about it a little bit, the roles that as a director and then on the advisory board?
So being a director on the board of England Boxing was an interesting journey. So when I started up the boxing charity, that opportunity came up to be a boxing director on the board, and I found it interesting because I sat on a few boards, But England Boxing has a particular kind of configuration of its board, as you know, which has sort of like boxing directors, which are specifically have the skills associated with the sport. So rather than transferable financial or governance skills, so we'll be in charge of technical and rules or coaching, and are responsible for subcommittees to the board on those kind of areas of expertise. So I felt, because I'd come up through the ranks and I was officiating and started a charity and I knew the sport pretty well by then, I'd have something to add. And interestingly, I was put in charge of and I was the second, I want to say second. Yeah, I was the first female boxing director, not the first director, because Tova was on the board before me, but she wasn't in boxing in the sport. So I was the first female boxing director. And I remember Sky Sportswoman featured me for that, which was quite interesting because it was quite a big thing at the time. But I was put in charge of the coaching subcommittee, and I'd never been a coach. And that was really very eye-opening to me. I think they wanted to sort of bust open the slightly sort of old boys coach development network that existed, and they wanted someone to come in and take a really fresh look at the coaching pathways. And I enjoyed that, because the first thing I did was disband the old coaching subcommittee. Them all out, and said we were going to create new terms of reference for the group, and they were welcome to reapply for their positions on the board, and it would have a panel and it would have criteria and it would be very transparent. And that caused a lot of bad feeling, because there are a lot of very well established, long serving volunteers, coaches and coach developers on that committee. But interestingly, only 2 of them, I think, applied for their position, and both got onto the committee. It was just that whole kind of like, let's try and do something differently and establish a new kind of way. Very, very undiverse still, the coaching pathway. I want to say, I might be wrong, there's still only one GB performance pathway coach that I know who's non-white. I think there's a real need for a different kind of application for those kind of level 3, above the level 2 coaching, which enables you to supervise sparring and open your own club and everything. Level 3 and beyond, there was a real need for sort of a new pathway there. So I did quite a lot of work supporting that. I didn't always feel listened to, particularly, I suppose, on the board as a woman or as a boxing director. I think it was quite easy at that stage for you not to have your perspectives listened to, but I'm quite stubborn, and I did it for 5 years. And I chose to do it because also I knew that it was going to affect my refereeing career, because it was a conflict of interest. It was considered to be a conflict of interest to apply for your international upgrade. So I don't know whether I would have or could have done my international upgrade to 1-star earlier than I actually ended up doing it. I don't regret that, because I think I needed the time that I had to get good enough, but it did very much put that kind of hiatus in my refereeing time. I think boxing is a sport that still struggles with its governance. I think we still have issues and challenges around diversity and inclusion, and around development of the different talent pathways and funding and club management, and the regions are a difficulty. I think the whole sort of constitutional variance between the regions causes problems to the sport. But I did what I could on the board, and then I was happy also to have the opportunity to support the World Boxing Inaugural Elite Championships for men and women in Liverpool, which had just happened, and that was a great experience, just being back in terms of like involved in a real strategic oversight of not just the delivery of the championships, but also creating a model that the new international federation can learn from and adopt wherever those championships go in the world afterwards. I thought that steering group was really well managed under the chairmanship, Jason Harbour. I thought the event director did a fantastic job in delivering those championships at really short notice with limited budget. But what I did see was world boxing has a long way to go, and it knows it's got a long way to go to become the established IOC championed and advocated for federation for the Olympics. And that's just to play a little bit of a part in some of those learnings and that model, and you know, to be able to reflect on that and input into that was really valuable experience. And I'd be interested in doing another sort of board member type governance role in boxing, I think, because I still think I have something to bring to the table. But I have limited time and energy now. I'm not getting any younger, Amy.
No, but I mean, I always respect you so much. Definitely during the time when you were one of the boxing directors for England Boxing, and I remember that, well, apart from you're always very well spoken, and I think you've got very high standards of values and everything, and then you really wanted to implement them, and I always respect you for that. And so yeah, I was so pleased for you. Obviously, like, you kind of took a little break from refereeing, so I was so pleased for you when I heard that you were selected as a member of the steering group for the World Boxing Championships in Liverpool. And I got the invitation from you as well to go there, so I'm
Look after my
even more
friend.
pleased.
It
But
was, yeah, it's a real learning experience. I think one of the things the championship tried to do really well, and maybe fell down just through no fault of anybody, was that kind of social outcomes piece. So legacy of that championships and the sport in different places where it's delivered, you know, the communities in the city, in Liverpool, how could they benefit from that? How I think we can be even more creative, even more innovative about what sport does. I think boxing's quite lazy in the sense that we tend to think, oh, it's a sport that supports young people, gets them off the streets. We're in the estates. We already do all that stuff. But actually, there's a lot of sports coming through. And in my wider sort of job, I see a lot of sports coming through that have traditionally been considered, unreachable to communities, certain communities, so equestrian, or rowing, or cricket. These sports are doing really, really well in their diversity, their inclusion, their quality of opportunity, their income generation through different kind of sources of funding. And I think boxing tends to have sat on its laurels a bit and need to think a little bit more creatively about the wider benefit of the sport in all of its forms. Because what worked really well for my boxing charity was we had the on-site boxing club that was registered with England Boxing and acted as an amateur club, but we also had the membership gym, so the members would support not only, and they paid their fees to support the boxing club, but also we got a lot of volunteers through the members who could then become on sort of the talent pathway as coaches or officials. So the model worked really well to kind of support the ecosystem of the sport. And I think somehow we're still a little bit siloed. There are the clubs that look after their own boxers, and they don't necessarily think about the sort of the broader impact and the broader reach of what we can do through that sport. And in fact, sport in general, not just boxing, for young people, their health, their well-being, their sort of active participation in their communities, their careers and life skills that they can gain through engagement in the sport. So that's kind of what I do in my day job anyway. So I was happy to kind of bring some of that perspective to the steering group and just kind of support that side of the work, as well as the delivery of the performance of the boxing at the championships.
Oh, that's amazing. I think we're obviously we're in boxing, so we're probably a bit biased, but I always say to people that I just think boxing is such a wonderful sport. And I think you mentioned, like, quite sort of earlier on, that when you first stepped into the boxing gym, you see people, they're like from the finance sector, but you also see, kids from the street, and then it's a space that there's no social construct, as you say, and then people blend in, and it's like a community, and then you always kind of feel just welcome, being looked after once you step into a boxing gym. So do you think that boxing is missing a trick here? Like, there's so much more that local community boxing gyms can do, or using it as a vehicle to really do something?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I do, but I also think there's a lot of systemic problems to that. There's problems in terms of like just the way that national governing bodies are funded and the outcomes that they're supposed to sort of produce, and the fragmented governance sort of worldwide of boxing. There's been so much, you've been aware that sort of breakaway kind of governing bodies, both nationally, regionally, nationally, and internationally, and the kind of the corruption that has made so many headlines, and has actually created, almost like trying to tackle that, has also created new problems from what I've seen. This is just my own perspective, but clearly from an officiating perspective, if the sport isn't seen to be fair, and it's very subjective, judging and it's really subjective, right? It's why we have 5 judges, but even with 5 judges, people can see different things even with applying the rules. So it's subjective. It's not like football where the number of times the ball goes in the net, right? It's not like that. So it can be right for corruption, and there have been instances where judges have been proven internationally more than nationally, I think, to be corrupt. And so we've tried to, as a sport, to kind of really tackle that. But I think what that maybe takes away from some of the things I've seen is the quality of the experience for officials. I mean, when I went up to Liverpool, you were there with me, that the officials aren't allowed to speak to anybody. They are kept in a darkened room between bouts. They are constantly scrutinised. And you know, I get it. I have mixed feelings about it. I get it. I understand the need for absolute probity and robust kind of governance of that. But also, like you said earlier, they're people and they need to enjoy what they're doing, contribute voluntarily to the sport. And if the experience is so stressful and so tough and so exhausting at that level, what are we actually doing? Where's the balance? So I think that the way the sport works, or sport works, especially in the UK and in the sector, is quite difficult. It's quite difficult. I don't think it's just a simple thing about saying, what more can boxing do to help the communities? It's like, actually, how can we fund clubs better to be sustainable and not be, you know, loads of them closed down during the pandemic because they're lurching from grant to grant to be able to kind of keep operating. And a lot of it, the volunteer workforce is fantastic, but it's also a problem because you rely on your volunteers. They have jobs and everything and families, but also they have a sense of entitlement as volunteers and don't want to change anything. You know, how many times have you sort of heard a coach say, well, you know, I don't need to go on a refresher course. I've been doing this for 50 years. Right? It's offensive for you to ask me to go on a refresher course. No, the rules change, things change, the guiding's changed. You know, everybody needs to refresh. But that kind of whole volunteer workforce, I think, is a benefit and a blessing and also a curse. So I'm not sure it's an easy thing to develop the sport to have more impact and to be more inclusive and stuff like that. I don't think it's easy. So I don't have the answers to those questions. But I agree with you about the values, especially at grassroots, the values-based stuff. You know, people do take anybody in and try to support them in those clubs and bring along their talent and make them feel part of the sort of community where they live, work and play, which I think is fantastic. Doesn't necessarily translate the higher up you go. And I alluded to that earlier about, you know, I had a poor experience, my second international tournament when I went out to Madrid, and I didn't enjoy it. I just didn't like it and didn't feel like I learned anything from that experience, or that I was supported in that experience when I didn't have a good experience. And it becomes quite, I think the culture can be quite toxic up at that end of the sport. And that's a shame, because I reflect back on my 13 years and think, you know, most of it I really loved, but it didn't come to the most fantastic end. I don't think, for me, I didn't feel like I finished on a high, which is a shame.
It is a shame. So what's next for you? Is there any chance for you to sort of go back to officiating, or any chance to, I don't know, come back to boxing?
I don't know. I think I will be careful how I say this, but I still think that there is very much a problem with the abuse of power in sport, or in our sport. I just do. I feel like a few individuals have a lot of say over who progresses and who doesn't at the upper levels, and a lot of control, and it's not always transparent, and it's not always very well supported. So if your face fits, like we talked about earlier, you say yes sir, no sir, and you kind of just make your own way, and, you know, trouble, and you don't speak out about things, then, you know, you're more likely to get on. And I don't appreciate that in my career. I didn't appreciate it in my officiating. And when I have raised concerns about that, sometimes with people that are supposed to govern our sport, those concerns haven't been addressed properly or adequately, in my opinion. And so it was a bit disheartening after all this time, I think, when you feel like things should really have progressed better. And I look back and I think, well, 5 years ago, there was 2 or 3 of us maybe stepping through the ropes in the ring into referee national championships. And was it last year or the year before? There were no women, because you'd gone and I'd gone, and there was another one of us who went, yeah, baby, great, but just like, why are we almost taking a step back? Why are we not really seeing the girls come through in an encouraged and a progressive way? And why do I, as kind of like somebody who could and tried to be a decent kind of like support and mentor to other girls coming through, ends up after 13 years feeling so disappointed about the way that it ended? I think it's a shame. So for me, I don't know, I would have to see a lot of change in sort of the way that decisions are made around officials' assignments and officials' progressions and upgrades and support at the top levels, before I really thought about whether or not I wanted to get involved again. And again, like I said, I have a big job now that I don't have a lot of time. We were sometimes doing, weren't we, Amy? We were doing like Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday, sometimes Sunday on the club circuit, all over the place. And I can't, I'm too tired to be doing stuff like that now. And when I take my leave, I want to take my leave and be able to go places and not just kind of go, well, there's Madrid down there and I've never been, but actually I'm going to get in a coach and be bussed 100 miles up the road where everything's crap. It's not, it's not something that you can kind of advocate to somebody if someone was to say, well, how did you find being an international referee? And be like, well, I had a really good experience my first time, really crappy one the second time. And when I raised concerns about that second time, my mentor said to me, yeah, well, that's going to happen in Spain. You're going to get stitched up. And that was the learning experience, supposedly, for like that week that I spent giving up my annual leave to have that experience. And I think it does come to the point where we think, is it worth it to me? Some people might be galvanized by that and think, okay, so I'm going to carry on and I'm going to show you and I'm going to become an Olympic referee and I'll stay in it 2 more years and try to get to be a 3-star. For me, I just thought that's not what it should be about. So, I don't want this to sound too negative because, as I said before, I've learned so much and had some really fantastic experiences and met some really great people that I'm still in touch with. I speak to Terry Gillen pretty much every day, and I've known him for 15 years, and he started me off in this sport, and he's done that to loads of people. Huge kudos to him for being ahead of his time and seeing that we had stuff to offer before we were really being looked at as part of the workforce. So, there are lots of people like that who have really, really helped us. So it doesn't, for the few bad apples that try to hold you back through male ego or jealousy or their own agendas.
Yeah. But that's why that I feel is such a shame and really, really a huge loss for England boxing to lose you as an official, a very senior official who has the knowledge and skills to communicate and to support, the up and coming referees, especially female referees. I just think it's such a huge loss.
I did try.
I know.
But there's only so much you can put your own head above the parapet, I think, for other people, and that's not me being like my own ego. Like, obviously, I fought for it for myself because I felt like I deserved that and I was owed that, like the respect of that. But also just because if no one speaks out about stuff that's not right, there are other. It's not just a female thing. I know there are other referees and judges who feel sidelined and feel, unvalued or unprogressed or unsupported because their face doesn't fit, and or because they've said the wrong thing or that people don't like their style. And this is wrong. Like, you're either capable or you're not capable. There's stuff like, oh, so and so, they're a 1-star, but they're not really a 1-star. They're quite crap. No, they're a 1-star because they qualified the same way as everybody else qualified and need to be given the same progression and development opportunities that everybody else is, not just because they're not your mate. So, those things still happen, and I'm sure they happen in lots of sports. It's not purview of boxing, but we have to judge, I guess, at what point it's not worth it to us anymore, to our own mental health and our own experiences and the bitching that we do to our families when we come home. So I just think at some point you just kind of go, there's other things that I can profitably be doing with my time and my skills. So we'll see. I'm not making any big kind of like commitments to or not to stay in the sport or contribute. And I really would like to do another kind of steering group type position if something suitable came up. So we'll see. We make change very slowly, but if we can help make those changes for ourselves and for other people who are coming through, then that's something to be really proud of.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely feel like you paved that way, for me and for many of us, like, after us and stuff. So I always appreciated that. So on that note, what would you, well, I know you kind of alluded that to sort of, different kind of advice for the new sort of female referees or judges coming through the ranks. But if you want to give one particular piece of advice for them, what would you say?
Really interesting question. Just one. Take your time and study the people that you admire and develop your own style.
Yeah.
Because we've seen lots of different officiating styles, and it's easy to understand. We understand the rules, we know how to apply the rules, but how to communicate in the ring, how to judge with discretion, and how to just be measured in our decisions, I think that's something that really takes time. And just watching the people that we really admire and listening to good advice. And I think appreciating that and taking on board what's helpful and what helps you become the official that you want to be, the official that you admire, watching loads of it, watching the championships and go, well, I wouldn't have done that as a ref. It doesn't mean that you're slagging off other refs. You're just going, that's not how I would have managed that because, and then kind of making those decisions accordingly. I guess that would be my advice.
Great. Thank you. I think that's a great advice. And I think like you said, there are always different options for a referee to take in the ring, and because we have to make a decision in a split second, and you almost have to kind of think like what's that best option at the time. And like you said, there's no bouts that's the same, right? Like every situation is different, and you just have to really, I think, really quickly think on your feet. But it's helpful for other referees to give you that other kind of perspective, different options that you might be able to consider the next time if similar situations come up. So I think,
I mean, I really hate watching myself. I really hate it. I think I look like a little penguin in the ring.
Especially when I roll my eyes.
We haven't done that for a while. But, I do try because, I mean, and sometimes, like, I don't know, I remember really one particular time, if we've got time where it's like, people don't understand the decisions that you make from the outside. So having the courage of your convictions, if you really believe something, then you just do it. You don't second guess yourself. Because, sometimes you can get it wrong, but mostly you'll get it right if you have that empathy towards the boxers. And that time I stopped a boy because I gave him a count and I was up quite close and I could see his pupils going like this. And it was a bit of an outrage about the decision to stop it. And when I watched it back, I could see that even the judges from ringside, he looked fine. He was up, he was here, he was ready to box. And so the supervisor, the judges, the crowd always thought it was a premature stoppage. But he then went and got checked by the doctor and then got taken to hospital with a concussion. So, and we can think that, for watching football or whatever, and we think the referee's made a mistake, but actually they are in the best position. If they're refereeing decently, they're in the best position to see. And so I think, those kind of decisions are really important because no one else can see what you can see in the ring. And it's always better. We've had this said to us, and actually it's funny, isn't it? Because they say it, they don't always mean it, but it's always better to stop about too early than too late. So, then you stop it too early and you get told off. But you know what I mean? It's like, it is better. Those things, just have convictions and stand by your decisions. Never ever go, maybe I should have done that, because it just doesn't help anybody. You just go, well, I'll do the same again because it was right to me at the time.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah. So, completely different note. Would you like to talk about your work, your current work, what's kind of in the future, what's happening?
From managing the boxing charity, I went to work for Sadiq Khan over his first term as mayor. So I was responsible for delivering his community sport investment programme for social outcomes for Londoners. I did that for 5 years and then took a job where I am now, which is at the University of East London. And my official title is Assistant Chief Operating Officer for Sport and Active Campus. Effectively, what I do is sport sort of strategy, partnerships, innovation and growth for students, staff and the local community. So how do we give students a good experience of being at uni through engagement with anything from sort of recreational participation in activity right the way through to performance sport, scholarships, high-end sort of elite university sport. It's a really interesting job. What I like most about it is I have been given a lot of scope to be really creative. So I've been doing a lot of work around changing how people perceive sport and physical activity. I think there's this whole kind of push that people need to be more active for their health, for their well-being, for the economy, for all of those things. And that's absolutely true. But it's no good just telling people they should do it because it's good for them. Because if they were going to do it, they'd be doing it anyway. So how do we change those perceptions and how do we look at broadening what's going to engage people and enrich them? So I do a lot around like community light festivals and participation through performance art or just being part of sort of having practical experience in delivering events, which are going to give you transferable skills. You may not want to do sport eventually, or you may fall off that talent pathway as a sports person and a scholar athlete, but you can use those skills in your life, in your career, in your progression. So I'm doing a lot of work to develop a new strategy for the university, which is about talent and performance, health and well-being, and academic innovation, trying to join up all of those dots so that everything we do has like delivery, but it also has new curriculum design or new courses or research or, you know, partnership working, to make sure that it's a kind of joined up offer. So it's an interesting job. It's a big job. We have 23,000 students. I have a really fantastic team of 40 in East London Sport, the professional service that I head up, and a great director of sport who helps me a lot, trying to kind of expand the offer of sport at university beyond what's traditional. So it's been really interesting. I'll say it's my 4th year. I have been working on a big facilities project for the university. So there's some development land at the Royal Albert Dock next to our Docklands campus, which I'm hoping to help build a new sports facility there, which will hopefully be an academy for boxing, for esports and basketball, as part of the big master plan for that area. So that's been quite exciting. And we're also, as of interest on this call, we're starting to introduce a new high performance boxing pathway onto our scholarship program, which we've never had before. So working with 8 or 10 East London based boxing clubs to start giving their boxers support in terms of strength and conditioning and nutrition and lifestyle free of charge. And whether they are or they aren't actually students at the university, we can give them access to a lot of support for the local club infrastructure. So that's fun as well. Yeah, there's lots of interesting things going on.
That's amazing. That's a huge job.
Yeah, it's quite a big job. It's quite a big job.
Yeah.
And I kind of fell into it, actually. It's very strange. When I refereed the national championships that were held at Sportsdock at the university, I didn't even know it existed. Sportsdock, it's a big arena facility, and it was held there. And I was like, oh, I didn't know this was here. And then about 6 months after doing that, was just after COVID, where we were still reffing in masks and everything. That was horrible. This job came up, and I was like, oh, that's where I'd be heading up, like where that happened. So it was kind of a bit weird the way it all came about, but it's a good move for me.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say that kind of, you know, many years ago when you stepped into the boxing gym for the first time, that's kind of almost like a pivotal moment, I guess, because you were in publishing before and then now you're in sports.
Really, I've got a really weird CV. Like you got to say, I've got a really weird CV. But I think you're right. All of those different elements. So the sort of the publishing, wrote some books, wrote some poetry, and then kind of had my child, and then went into like third sector sort of charity, you know, work, and then went to regional government and policy and grant making and all of that, and then to the higher education sector. It's a lot. So it's inevitable that I'm going to learn a lot about myself and actually have to manage some of my less attractive qualities in work and in the ring. So, yeah, you can say, I mean, you have your own kind of like business based around the things that you learn through boxing, right? All of the sayings that are sayings for a reason, like below the belt and in your corner, and they become part of everyday life and everyday parlance because they're real and they're true. So a lot of those things that we learn, we can definitely apply to our careers and our leadership skills. And you know, at this stage in my life and in my job, I give thanks for a lot of those things that I've learned, because I don't think I would have come this far without them. Resilience is a really interesting word, right? But whether or not it's right, in boxing, you have to be resilient, whether you're boxing, coaching, officiating. So yeah, you have to be resilient in work as well, and actually just kind of take it on the chin sometimes. And it's not happening how I wanted it, but I'll find another way, you know, be creative. So that's what I try to do.
Oh, that's amazing.
Thank you.
So finally, before we finish our conversation, is there anything that you feel that's really important that I haven't asked, that you haven't talked about?
And I just hope we see more diversity coming through with good experiences in all levels of our sport, and that, you know, the governance permits that and really kind of authentically embraces it, because there's so much talent. Like if you look at talent in the broadest possible way, everybody that's engaged in our sport should be able to stay in it if they want to in some way or another. You know, whether that's just being part of a club or, you know, volunteering or, you know, spectating. All of these things are a really important part of keeping the ecosystem of the sport going and keeping those positives that you and I have enjoyed so much kind of there, and keeping that perspective. So, you know, I think anything that we can do to support that is really worthwhile, and I'm really pleased to have been a part of it.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Hilary. I mean,
No problem, Amy.
you know,
No
I'm
problem.
forever grateful for what you have done for me, you know, the support that you have given me throughout the whole, you know, all the years and everything. And I also really appreciate what you have done for the sport, for the community, for, you know, now the wider communities and the university students and everything. And I just think that you're absolutely amazing. And I think like you always,
Thank you.
but
Get
honestly,
shiny.
no, honestly, you're so selfless. And it's not just me saying it. I've heard it from, you know, various people that you would be so selfless that if you think there's a good opportunity for others to go for, then you would just ask them without selfishly thinking that, no, I'm going to go for it. You would just put other people forward.
Kind of, no, I understand what you're saying. You have to pay it forward, right? And given opportunities, you have to pay it forward. And, you know, and I like that. I love seeing, I mean, I'm really proud of you, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how your career progresses in the pros. And I'm learning from some of the stuff that you tell me about the repping experiences and stuff. And so, you know, what goes around comes around, doesn't it? It's not even about doing it because it's the right thing to do. It actually does bring a lot of pleasure as well. So maybe it isn't as selfless as it seems.
Well, so
Anyway,
it,
thank you for the opportunity to chat,
no,
Amy.
thank
Really
you so
nice,
much for
and
your
good luck to
time.
you.
And thank you.
No
Thank you for
problem.
sharing
Have a
your
lovely
wisdom.
Christmas.
Yeah, you
Okay.
too.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you do, please comment, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.